debates going on all around. Some say we should stop singing this sad song and forget our call for reparation. But we just can't sit down, forget and ignore the pain and sorrows our ancestors had to endure. The horror of slavery still haunts this generation because they never asked to be stolen and forced into servitude, chained up, shackled, bruised and battered and treated oh so crude. Millions of white oppressors benefited by enslaving Africans, so the descendants of slaves have a right to call for reparations. For all the slaves that they stole away, tell them that they have to pay.
We want reparation for slavery.
For all the violence and all the hurt, for making Africans believe that they had no right.
We want reparation for slavery.
For all of the pain and all of the shame. Somewhere, somehow, we want reparation now. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Somewhere, somehow, we want reparation now. African women were raped by white slave masters to satisfy their sex crazed desires, while black men could only watch and do nothing. And the African slave tried to run away without a doubt it was hell to pay. If they got caught, they would be lynched or they'd lose a limb. They were denied education and all basic human rights. To live as a slave was to live a horrible life. In the service of the white slave master, from the cradle to the grave, no compensation, no hope for the African slave. For all of the work they did in the past, for giving them all laws in human time.
We want reparation for slavery.
For the Jim Crow laws and segregation, for all those who got lynched by the Ku Klux Klan.
We want reparation for slavery.
For all those atrocities,
Reparation.
painful memories. Somewhere, somehow, we want reparation now. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Somewhere, somehow, we want reparation now. Listen. They broke up the African family, took away their rights and their dignity. Their religion and way of life was stolen. Subject them to a cultural genocide, took away the sense of African pride. Their defiant African spirit was broken. The transatlantic journey separated Africans from Africa. Many were scattered through the diaspora. Thousands died while making the journey to toil as a slave in the white man's land. So this is a call on behalf of those Africans. For every slave who died while making that trip, for every slave who was ever
Reparation for slavery.
for every slave who was sold on the auction block, white men called them good African stock.
We want reparation for slavery.
For the Holocaust. American Indians for their painful past. Aborigines in Australia got some as well. But not one thing for the African who is called from their native land. It seems Africans were born to catch real hell. Great Britain and North America stole the wealth out of Africa. They built their empires on the back of slave labor. And when they said that slavery was over, the white slave masters got compensation. But yet today, Africans still fighting for reparation. Then I hear the former British Prime Minister say, forgetting slavery upon yesterday. Who is the man that sincere apology? Then destroy the true African legacy. Reparation for slavery. For all of the pain and all of the shame. Somewhere, somehow we want reparation. Whoa, 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 whoa. Somewhere, somehow we want reparation. Let's not even get up. What are you?
Oh, yes. Who says that the reparation message is not gaining steam? Tiny Williams out of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm challenging the Guyanese Calypsonians and reggae scene to begin to sing about reparations, to begin to sing about slavery, not because we want to talk about Black people's story alone, but because we are saying our Guyana, our Caribbean, at the core of understanding who we are in 2023, you have to understand the profundity of slavery to shaping our Guyana, our Caribbean, the world. Capitalism, European wealth would not be possible, was not possible, is not possible without that slave labor, unpaid labor. As I said, what's all the quarrel about? We don't have to make a case anymore. 200 and odd years without a penny. That's the case. Case closed. You know, I saw a letter by Vishnu Bishram in today's papers saying that Indian people suffered chattel slavery. Suffered chattel slavery. Why this drumbeat of trying to equate indentureship with slavery? We know the answer. We know why. We know why they're trying to do that. And that is why last night I talked about the Eastern Slave Project, when they were waging war and catching Africans from North Africa and East Africa and taking them to what is today Turkey and India and Pakistan and so forth. The African presence in those parts of the world was as a result of chattel slavery. They took the women and turned them into concubines, and the men, and forced them to fight wars for them. We know about the transatlantic slave trade, but there is also that other slave project, the Eastern Slave Project. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. Tonight we're going to be talking reparations with Eric Phillips. We're gonna be talking rep. I remember well a few years ago when Eric Phillips argued that Africans were here long before Columbus. They were in the Americas. And he was making that case, and people were saying that, you know, he was being anti-Amerindian, anti-indigenous people, and so on. And we didn't quite understand what he was saying. You see, Africans were in Europe long before the transatlantic slave trade. They were in the Middle East long before the transatlantic slave trade. And they made their way. When Ivan van Sertima said that they came before Columbus, people used to laugh at him in the 70s. And he was saying Africans were here long before Columbus. You see, the denial of the real African history is a political ploy to distribute the wealth of today unequally. Slavery was about the non-distribution of wealth. African labor, not a penny. Not a penny. Why the drum beat? There have been people who've been laboring in the valleys, they're laboring in the vineyard for this reparations thing for decades and decades. And now we have gotten to the point where reparations is now a household name. And that white people came here and said, we did bad things to Africans. And we owe them. The successor states are trying to wriggle their way out of reparations. You see, as I said last night, I don't want 1 cent of our reparation money go to any government or resources. Whatever resources come as a result of reparations must go to African people for African people to determine it. That oil wealth is reparations, you know. Down there in the Atlantic Ocean, a lot of black bones and black bodies. And they don't want to distribute that reparations in an equitable way. That's why we are mobilizing. First of all, we want you all to become literate about reparations. That's why we keep covering it. Good evening. Welcome to all of you. Tonight we're going to be talking about reparations. The Gladstones were here. A lot of noise was made. I made my point very clear. I'm glad the Gladstones came. Because what they did is they said slavery and the impact of slavery is real. It's real. And if all the ethnic groups in Guyana can agree on one thing or ought to agree on one thing, and that is that slavery was incomparable. What? Indians have a right. Native Americans have a right. Portuguese and Chinese, they all have a right to demand reparations. They all have a right to make their cases for reparations. But you first of all must make your case based on your circumstances. Don't make your case based on some comparison with slavery. There's no comparison with slavery. Oh my God. So, as we would say in the village, are we de Panam? But we are well poised. Well poised. The man who was being behind that whole visit by the Gladstone, behind the reparations, putting a lot of energy into it is Eric Phillips. We live in the kind of society, even among our people, African people I'm talking here, we don't like to give credit. Because we feel if we give credit to somebody, we are diminishing ourselves, the rest of us. All of us have our roles to play. And we've never believed in the deification of the individual, but we've always recognized the role that individuals play in shaping our community, shaping our instincts, shaping our society. So tonight we continue with reparations. Tiny Williams was the calypsonian there, out of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm challenging Guyanese singers. There are all kinds of things to sing about. Wine on this and wine up on. I don't have a problem with that. We got a party. If we didn't party, I don't know what would have happened to us. As Sparrow said, we got to broke down the dance hall. But when we finish broken down the dance hall, we still have to look at our own condition. And so I'm challenging the Guyanese artists to catch the reparations spirit and put it in song. I can go and find about 5-6 reparation songs, reparation calypsos out of Trinidad in the last 5 years. And I've been playing them for you all. Sparrow talked about reparations since in the 1960s. In that classic, I Am a Slave. He make me work, no pay. He's been talking about reparations since then. Welcome to you all, and thanks for those of you who messaged me about last night's program and the history. We have to tell our own story. We sell people into slavery. You all cut it out. They were warring tribes, and they were selling the bounty from war. They considered those people that they were selling their enemy. Don't let people believe that black people screw up, so we sell we own into slavery. The Amerindians were doing the same thing. Europeans were doing the same thing. The notion of the African is a transatlantic, post-transatlantic notion. Before that, they were civilizations. Egypt and Nubia and Ethiopia and Songhai and Mali and Chad and Ghana. And so this thing to believe that we are so screwed up that we sell we own in slavery. As I said, Ravi, they keep talking about the Africans who came as indentured servants. Yes, they came as indentured servants. Yes, they did. And insofar as they undercut the wages of the freed Africans, they were part of a system, but they quickly found out that those freed Africans were their brothers and sisters, and that is why they melted into our community. They were not in conflict. They're always trying to put me against each other. But anyhow, let me do it thing. Let me welcome Brother Eric. Brother Eric, good evening.
Hi, David. Good to see you.
Chief Eric. Chief Eric. Let me put my mouth right. Because we've been doing things and we've been doing a lot. Welcome, Chief Eric, and it's been a long time coming, but as we say, it's better late than never. Look, you have been behind this reparations thing for a long time, as they would say, since I was in short pants. And you've been behind this reparations thing. As you survey 2023, as you listen to that calypso and others, are you satisfied that we have made some progress in popularizing the whole notion of reparations as not a fad, but as something that is central to our understanding of our society today?
David, first let me thank you for having me on. And before I answer that question, I'd like to reinforce three things you said. First is the issue about Africans selling Africans. That's untrue. Africa had 3,000 tribes. There were wars. There were wars that were nurtured by the West, who brought weapons and all sorts of things and created a market. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which we don't want to talk about, is this paper called Amerindians in the 18th Century Plantation System of the Guianas. It's 18 pages. Here it states that three Amerindian groups in Guyana attacked seven other Amerindian groups, killed the men, and sold the women into Dutch slavery. And that went on for 40 years. And the people who are here are Sister Manise, Armstrong, all the people who are in Guyana writing history all these years. They never told us this, and our Black historians never found this out. This was written in 2006, and you'd be shocked. The third point I'd like to make is that without our Calypsonians, without us using culture to popularize reparations, we're not going to get anywhere. We need them on board. Barbados has an icon doing it, Jamaica. Eddie Grant sang a song almost 20 years ago, and all the people you were mentioning. In the last 5 years, everything is coming out of Jamaica and Trinidad. And yet, we've made more progress in Guyana than all of those countries. We're disconnected from our African reality, and we're afraid to talk our story. And that's why we're not singing it in song. But coming back to your point, we've made tremendous progress. I never believed that in 10 years, because it's 10 years since the Caricom Reparations Commission was formed, that we would be this far. The Dutch have apologized. The Portuguese want to apologize. The Church of England apologized. Harvard, Glasgow, on and on, the Bank of Holland, 11 cities in the Netherlands. So it is gaining momentum. In the United States, there are over 150 groups dealing with reparations at many levels. It's big in England. I helped to form a group in the Netherlands. I was there twice, the Netherlands Reparations Committee, which is supporting people from Suriname who are in Holland, who are being discriminated all over, and they didn't want to be left out. But everyone is speaking about it. We had the Trevelyan's in Grenada, but we crunk that with the Gladstones because they were the second largest receiver of the 20 million pounds. Most people don't know that 13 of the top 25 payments for reparations to the enslavers were from Guyana. Most people don't realize that an enslaved African in Guyana was worth 52 pounds compared to 17 pounds in the rest of the Caribbean. Most people don't realize that we are the only post-slavery society where we bought plantations and turned them into villages, which is the structure and formation of Guyana. So we've had a central role in this. Our three historians, well, we have more than three. Walter Rodney, they came before, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Ivan Van Sertima, they came before Columbus. George G.M. James, Stolen Legacy. So regardless of where you go, Guyanese have been central to moving this issue of reparations for a long, long, long while. And now it's accelerating. And I'm surprised myself because now we have the traditional kings and queens on. In Barbados last month, we had the African Union on board. So all these partnerships are now coming together to push the momentum. So the British can't hide. The Brattle Group under Chief Justice Patrick Robinson has evaluated the harm to be 107.3 trillion. He was in England last week saying that England can no longer hide. King Charles is trying to finesse it. But what history is a cycle because it was King Charles II who accelerated the monopoly of the monarchy in England. And now King Charles III has the opportunity to apologize and to push the reparations. But I also want to add one point, which is central. Anybody who equates indentureship with slavery is committing academic immorality because they know it's untrue. 473,000 Africans died to build Guyana, and nobody knows that. So I would not argue with Vishnu and Ravi. They know they're lying because they want to jump on the wagon now. I wonder if they will tell the Jewish community that indentureship was the same as their Holocaust. Why don't they go and try that? They're eye-passing us when they do it. And because we don't know our history, the way we answer them is inadequate. We need to shut them down. They're racist when they say that. And they know it.
Brother Eric, Chief Eric Phillips here tonight, Brother Eric Phillips. It's opening remarks there. Eric, before I talk about the Gladstone visit, you sent me earlier the Blatter report, and it's saying it's quantifying, and it's quantifying what is owed. 77 to 108 trillion
dollars.
American money, not Guyanese money.
And it's well documented. It's well documented. But one of the groups that does these types of things, when a plane gets bombed in Libya, America sends this group to do the compensation. And they look at sexual harm, they look at loss of life, they look at loss of labor, they look at loss of freedom. Also, it's documented like you wouldn't believe.
Yes, let me read it here. Mental pain, gender-based violence, personal injury, loss of liberty,
foregone earnings,
foregone earnings, deprivation of citizenship, deprivation of family. This is fascinating, Eric. This is the kind of work, and they're saying that this is conservative.
Yes, these figures they haven't done psychological harm because it's so huge, because that includes mental slavery.
And we have in the audience here Brother Selwyn Peters, and Selwyn as a lawyer doing labor law. You know what we're talking here in terms of quantifying. You understand what we're talking here. Eric, this is real fascinating stuff that we have to get into the minds of our people.
Absolutely.
I have argued that the Caribbean states can begin to pay reparations tomorrow by inserting in the school curriculum the study of slavery, which obviously then leads to the study of reparations. I think they can do that tomorrow. They can do that tomorrow. Let's come to the Gladstone family and their visit to Guyana. Talk to us about what went on behind the scenes.
Oh my goodness. In April, I was invited to speak at the Institute of Black World in Baltimore, State of Black America. It's every 2 years.
Yes.
And I chaired a couple of groups, and in the audience was Laura Trevelyan, who had apologized to Grenada because her ancestors had owned just over 1,000 enslaved. Notice I didn't say slaves. She asked Sir Hilary Beckles to be introduced to me, and I was introduced to her the next morning at breakfast. And she said to me, Eric, we're forming a group called Heirs of Slavery. These are all of the people who have benefited from slavery. We're coming together to a group to advocate that Britain and all the European countries should negotiate with CARICOM because it's a just cause. We know it's a just cause. We know we are a society of privilege. We benefited from our ancestors' wealth, which was extraction from the Caribbean. Then she said to me, I know Charles Gladstone. Would you like to meet him? So I said yes. So from the beginning of May until they got here, we met on Zoom every Friday at 7:30. And it was quite difficult at first because here are some people saying that their ancestors were all sorts of bad words. And I'm trying to judge their sincerity. But over the period of time, I realized they were really sincere. And then, of course, they wanted to come to Guyana to apologize. But they did not want to make this a political spectacle. They knew that their ancestor, John Gladstone, also had brought the first 396 indentured to Guyana from India. And they recognized, because they're smart, the political divisiveness in Guyana. And they figured that if they were to come straight to the government, it would become a PPP versus APNU thing. And they did not want that, whatever you want to call it, triumphalism, because neither of those groups had anything to do with reparations, because they're not engaged with us. The government, yes, funds the reparations committee $50,000 a year. They don't tell us what to do. The APNU, we've engaged them. They don't get involved. And I'll come to that. So after figuring out what to do, and after convincing them that they should come, because they really wanted to come, we created a process in which we would minimize the political divisiveness, because their goal not only is to apologize, but to create a fund to help the beneficiary, help African Guyanese. Let me put it straight. And also, they wanted this trip to be such that it should not prevent others who want to join their group from joining them, because if they come to Guyana and they get beat up, they get coerced up, nobody else will join their group. As of today, David, because I spoke to Laura Trevelyan this morning, 125 of former wealthy people from slavery have now joined their group. Some are in New Zealand, some are in Australia, a lot are in the USA. And they're coming together to form a lobby group. They already have an office in London where they're doing things to educate the British public, because we can't in Guyana, we can't in Jamaica. The British got to educate the British in the same way that Guyanese got to educate Guyanese, Jamaicans got to educate Guyanese. So it was a tough trip, because when they arrived, there was a protest at the airport. Now, what is fascinating about this protest was that there were 60 people. I went out and met with them. 57 were Amerindians who didn't know why they were there, because I asked them what they're doing here. One was an Indian guy who was coordinating everything, and there were two elderly Black women. When I asked them why they were there, they said they were here to protest, and they were given placards. Now, here's the divisiveness about this. Amerindians, if we're being real, should apologize to Africans. They were used by the Dutch and the British to police us. They hunted us down in the 1763. They killed Kwamina. All these things. But Black people don't complain about that because of who we are. They were with the Gladstones. They were with the Dutch. They were with the British. And so somebody tricked them into coming to the airport and to talk about, what about us for reparations? They already have reparations, David. They have the Amerindian Act of 2006. They already own 19% of Guyana. They already have a Tachaus Council that is funded by the Constitution. They also have an Amerindian Development Fund that just received $200 million in carbon credits. And yet, 3 of those 9 groups were never in Guyana before us. The Waiwais, the Makuchis, and the Wapishanas came to Guyana 100 to 200 years after we were here. But because of our politics and we calling them First Peoples, we don't want to differentiate. We don't want to talk about they were hunting themselves and selling themselves before we were brought here. And that they were, if they're getting reparations, we should. So that was the first thing. And that could only have been set up by one group of people who knew they were coming, who knew the exact time the flight was going to be here. Then we came down to Eugene, which after a long debate, they did not want to do it any other place other than at a university, because that's what Laura did in Grenada, because they didn't want the politics, and they felt the university is an academic environment, they can survive there. So we decided on that after about 5 weeks of debate. And when they heard the government wanted to move it, they sent me an email, which I can read to you, that they're not coming because they do not want to get caught up in the politics. They're here to apologize to Black people, and they're here to also apologize for indentureship, which they know is totally different things. So we created a program in which they would go to UG. They would then have a TV program with us, and it's an incredible TV program because we interviewed Laura Trevelyan, we interviewed the Gladstones, they apologized on TV, and then the young people, the 3 of them, they brought 3 young people and 3 elderly people, 6 of them. Our poet, young poet, Crystal Crawford, who is brilliant, she interviewed them on TV. That show was been shown last Sunday. Somebody's hiding it. Now, after that, there was a dinner at the British Embassy. We did not go, even though we were invited, because the British government is anti reparations and the Gladstones are for reparations. Anyhow, the next day we had an event at AGDA where we invited African organizations. We did a spiritual event because our ancestors got to accept. You and I can't accept for their pain. So they went through a ceremony in which Brother Irvin did what he needed to do to see if the apology was genuine. And then, of course, we took them to Buxton. And in Buxton, Tukuntu, Sister Yvette, they had a great time. They eat up the food, they dance, they do folk songs, but they also went and sat at the table with most of the people who were elderly and chatted with them. And instead of spending 2 hours, they spent almost 4 hours there. AGDA was involved again, working with Tukuntu to make sure that they felt comfortable. Because the goal, David, is that when they go back, they must feel predisposed to create a big fund for African projects in the community, which is what they've sent me a note saying, thank you for the tremendous welcome African Guyanese have given us. And we look forward to working with you to go after some of the projects we identified whilst we were there. And more importantly, this has now strengthened our cause to go and recruit more people to pressure the government of Europe to negotiate. Because as you know, David, and most people don't recognize this, right now, the reparations process is a sovereign state process. CARICOM, Europeans. No individual groups can negotiate. But I also want to say to you and agree with you that no political party should be managing any reparations for Black people in this country. None. And so what we have done as a reparations committee, we hired a lawyer in 2017. After we did a COI, where we argued that we should get 18% of Guyana because our ancestors cleared 15,000 square miles. By the way, David, 15,000 square miles is twice all of the other Caribbean islands combined, Jamaica, Barbados, and we cleared it from the sea. And we lost 473,000 lives, more than any, because it was swamp and snakes and all of that. We're still struggling because we're on the sea level. So we created a ancestral rights bill, which needs to go to Parliament, that is similar to the Amerindian Act of 2006, but also very different. We had a lawyer do that. And then we hired another group to create a perpetual trust. That perpetual trust basically says any funds for reparations will go into this, and it will be managed by 23 trustees, 17 of which are elected by village councils, and 6 of which are technical people, and they will have 1 vote, whereas the 17 will have 1 vote each. This way, if an African descendant wants 10,000 acres of land and they have a business plan, the technical group would look at it and basically analyze it and recommend it to the group, and they would get the 10,000 acres plus money to develop their land if it involves the African community. If the committee says there should be cash transfers, then that happens. But no governments of any type. And the reason we've argued for that is because unlike other countries in the Caribbean, which are predominantly Black, we have a very different environment here. And I like what you said about the oil, because it's our ancestors' bones that creating that oil, and we're not getting any of it. So we have to be practical, we have to be smart, and that's what we did since 2017. We met with the Patagy and discussed that. Their view was a different village council structure than ours. We wanted our village councils to be Buxton, the original plantations that were turned. They wanted to follow the Constitution. We rejected that because right now in the Constitution, we got RDCs and NDCs, and we got lands bought by our ancestors, now managed by other people who had no right to manage it. So we said no to that. Plus, more importantly, that's in the Constitution, and that's very political, and we needed to ring fence it. we would go and create new village councils that of Africans and African descendants. They would be elected in those villages, and they would manage the perpetual fund, not any government.
Brother Eric Phillips here, laying it out for us. What went on behind the scenes? Now, there's some things I'm learning here tonight, and I'm sure that you all are learning here tonight. The protesters, here they are pitting Amerindians against Africans. The fact that the Gladstones made it very clear that they did not want government and political parties involved. So it's not the black leaders who are making that request. It's the Gladstones who are making that request. And look, our governments, including governments that have been supported predominantly by black people, have not been matured on the question of race, the question of slavery. They have generally put the fight for votes and the fight for black justice in the same pan, in the same mortar. They do not belong there.
Absolutely not.
They do not belong together. And this has been the problem with our leadership. And because they've not been matured, I support the reparations committee view that they should not manage one set. And I'm saying not just the Indian-dominated political party and government, but the African-dominated political party and government. They are not matured enough on the question of race, on the question of slavery. They've hidden the facts about slavery. They've refused to make slavery a central part of the curriculum. Our University of Guyana still does not have a department of Black Studies, a department of African Guyanese Studies. I teach in a department of African Guyanese Studies. I teach in America, capitalist America, which is perhaps most resistant when it comes to this issue. Yet, there, you can go to a university and you can get a degree. You can get a degree on Black Studies. I made sure my children, all who went to universities, they could study whatever else they wanted to study. But the one thing I insisted, get a degree in Black Studies. And they could do it in America. Why not in Guyana? And I think that is
or Jamaica, or Trinidad, or Barbados.
Or Barbados. And this is Eric, 68 and 55 years after Walter Rodney's banned from Jamaica for wanting to teach African history. We still don't have a degree. We still don't have a degree in societies where we are overwhelming majorities or we are slight minorities. And I think this issue has to be an issue. And I want you to talk about this issue, about African Black studies in our education curriculum. I want to talk about that and what that would do in terms of settling this question of dispute between slavery and other things.
David, I'll give you an example that is current. At the National Gallery, Castellani House, we have an 1823 bicentennial exhibition of over 100 pictures. Mm-hmm. And the way we approached it, because we know that it's not going to be taught in school, we started with Africa before slavery. Lucy, Dinkinet, the Lebumba Bones, the pyramids, Imhotep, Mansa Musa, Lalibela, Timbuktu, Mali, the Benin Bar. So just to show what Africa was before slavery, all the kingdoms we had, the wealth, the technology in building the pyramids, which they cannot even build today, even though it's 5,000 years old. That pyramid had 1.3 million stones, 2.5 tons to 15 tons each, stacked 135 levels. They can't do that today, even with the most incredible technology. Then we went to the Middle Passage. We started with the papal bulls. Most people don't realize that the 3 papal bulls by the Catholic Church, Pope Nicholas to King Alonso in 1452, the first one, Dum Diversas, made chattel slavery real. It said that anybody who's not a Christian can be put into perpetual slavery and all their belongings taken away. And that started Columbus and all of them. And before I go away with this, David, you made a point that people didn't catch. The Moors ruled Europe for 800 years, up to 1492. They were all over the world. People don't realize that. They built the first universities. They taught the Europeans how to use water to cleanse themselves. They have incredible architecture still. All of that we've forgotten. But then I also showed Queen Nzinga and Queen Amina and all of that. But in the Middle Passage, we showed the 3 to 6 month torture where our people were dying, they're throwing them overseas. 15% of those who were on the ships died. We showed the sharks following the ships. We showed them raping women on the boats. See, like punishment. And then we showed the tools of torture that they used. And then we went to the third segment of this exhibition, plantation life. What happened when they were in Guyana? The horrors, the lack of food, the punishment, the sexual abuse, the rape. And then we showed coffee and the 1763 rebellion and why they rebelled. By the way, David, in about 4 weeks, a group from the Guyana Reparations Committee will be going to Suriname. We found coffee's descendants.
Wow.
There are 300 of them living in Suriname, called the Quenties. I'm in contact with them. My Surinamese contact in the Netherlands put me in contact with them. They've been there since 1763, and we don't know. What's wrong with us? These were Maroons. So continuing with the 1763, we showed the coffee, 1763, we showed Philip Moore's monument and all of that. Then upstairs, we still downstairs in Castellani House. Downstairs, we started to show the 1763. And we use artificial intelligence renditions of Kwamina, Amber, and Jack. I have seen some depictions of Jack and Amber that reinforce the myth that we were starving, that we were without humanity. These are things that are being used all over the UK to depict Jack. We created a Jack, an Amber, and a Kwamina that are human because our ancestors were human. They built Guyana. And so upstairs we show Jack, Kwamina, Amber. We showed John Smith. We showed Kwamina's letter, original letter to the London Missionary Society. We showed that there was a Dutchman, Hermanus Post, who wrote to the London Missionary Society to send missionaries, who taught them to read and write. If you were to look at Kwamina's handwriting, it's better than most of our handwriting today. Then we saw we created a huge wall, almost 30 feet, of the Battle of Bachelors and Villager. Then we showed the aftermath. They cut off the heads, the hanging. Then we went into the village movement, Victoria and Buxton and all the things our ancestors did. Then we went into the CARICOM reparations and Guyana's claims. You know what, David? None of the people who are now interested in reparations came to that exhibition, even though it was sent out to them, because we're not interested in our history. And that's why it's not taught, because we've come accustomed to politicians hiding our history, so that Indians and Amerindians and Portuguese and Chinese will never know the achievements, that we cleared 15,000 square miles, that we moved 100 million tons of earth, that we cleared 9 million acres, that we built 2.58 miles of sea defense and water and that. They don't want to know that because they were not here. So to say that indentureship is the same as slavery, when we lost our culture, we lost our names, we were raped, we were killed, we were murdered, and you're going to equate that Holocaust with indentureship? Go tell that to the Jews or the Jewish community. So coming back to your point, David, history should be taught in our schools. Every African home should know their history because they'll be more proud. And other groups in Guyana will realize our contributions, and we would live better because we'll know their achievements and they'll know our achievements. The politicians don't want that. It's pure winner take all. And when the APNU is in power, they should have made it mandatory because it benefits them more than the other party. But again, it comes back to what these parties are. They're disconnected from culture, from our culture.
Yeah, yeah. Eric, look. What you're talking about, this education thing, is powerful. I teach the introductory to Africana studies, which begins in antiquity and comes all the way to the present. I teach it both at the undergraduate and the graduate level, and I see what that knowledge does to young
Self-esteem.
people,
Yeah.
and not just Black young people, but non-Black young people. It opens up a whole new world for them.
David, we had more Indians and Amerindians go to that exhibition than Africans.
Yeah.
And if you see the comments, I never do this. I felt like crying. These are the comments we're getting. And by the way, I must compliment Mandisa Baptiste, who is Guyanese, who lives in Holland. Not in Holland, in Norway, who use artificial intelligence, computer technology to create the battle scenes. These battle scenes are huge, 52 inches by 36. So it's real. You could feel the battle. You could feel the crimes being committed against us. And somebody living in Norway can do that and study our history. And Guyanese living in Ghana don't even know anything about it.
We've got our work cut out, but we are doing that work. That work is extremely important. Eric, let's talk a little bit about 1823 because we are 200 years. I was on a program in Antigua a couple of weeks ago and talking about 1823. And the general comment, the announcer, the moderator was generous enough to read the comments, and they all said new information. They never knew 1823. Talk about the importance of 1823 and why 200 years later we have to continue to talk about it.
1823 was the largest revolution in the Caribbean outside of Haiti. 55 plantations, David, 10 to 12,000 Africans who were educated because they were taught to read and write, but they also taught about their rights. And they realized that slavery and Christianity are incompatible. So sugar was now being introduced, and so they had to work longer. Their Sundays were taken away. They were being punished. They were being brutalized. And so they decided to revolt. But being Christians, they didn't want to kill anybody. So in one of the largest revolutions ever, only 3 people were killed. And one was a very nasty overseer. They locked them up so as not to kill them. And then they demanded their rights. But guess what the British did? They shot them because they only had cutlasses. They shot them, killed 200 bachelors' adventure, and then went from village to village. Remember, there were 55 villages involved, plantations, and started to do summary executions on the spot. And worse so, they made some of our ancestors cut off the heads of those they'd already shot, put them on staves, and decorated Mahaika to parade ground with their heads. Kwamina, who was the leader but was really Jack, he was shot in his back by an Amerindian arrow. They took him and took the plantation Success, which was owned by the Gladstones. And they left him there to rot into nothing for over a month. Jack Gladstone, who was really his son, because Kwamina was really Kwamina Gladstone, he actually was sent to St. Lucia because they didn't want to make him a martyr. The impact was dramatic because the world saw the criminality and the brutality. The abolitionists, Clarkston, Wilberforce, Hannah More, all of them got up in disbelief and started to argue against slavery. Of course, the British government was put on the spot because the local colonists blamed John Smith, the priest, as the person who organized it. Again, taking away the agency from our ancestors for using the church to organize and plot and to have a strategy in place. They always give somebody else the credit. He was tried and sentenced to death, but he was being pardoned from England. But whilst that pardon was coming, he died. But that accelerated the Emancipation Act. That changed the way they started to treat our people. So there were laws afterwards not to beat women. They used to beat women, 18 things. Let me add another point. For every African that was brought to Guyana, 3 were bred. And that's why the Brattle report goes through this analysis. They bred them because they were free people. If a woman is impregnated, that's a free slave. They don't have to pay for them. And that's how they kept manufacturing other Africans here. You know, it is so horrible when you start to read what our ancestors went through. And yet they cleared all that land. Yet they moved 100 million tons of earth without a spade. And of course, this led to a lot of changes in England. And ultimately, another war, which was the 1831 Baptist War in Jamaica, again led by somebody who's Christian. Those two created the acceleration of the Emancipation Act. Of course, we had Busa in Barbados. Right? And we had 1763. You know, a lot of Jamaicans tell me that the nice slaves were sent to Ghana, the bad ones were to Jamaica. But we had the worst revolutions. We fought. We had African Jeanette, who was a Akan princess, who used to poison her masters with herbal remedies. They would die 3 months later. We had resistance all over the place. All those people are lost in Guyanese history. And then to look at how our people have impacted the world of reparations and African history. Walter Rodney, George G.M. James, Ivan Van Sortema, a small nation like Guyana with 3 of the premier historians in Africa, born in Guyana. So there's something in the African Guyanese blood that made us buy villages, that made us base it on the home, on family, on church, on school, and on self-reliance. We were the first entrepreneurs in Guyana. The first one was Victoria, 78 men and 5 women. We don't even know their names, David. At least we should know the women's names. We had Winkle in Berbice, where we had freed Africans who were engineers, who used to be sent around to fix plantations, even before the village movement. We don't even know that. We don't even know the 3 of the indigenous groups. The Waiwais came here 200 years after we were. The Wapichanos came here 100 years after we were here. The Makusis came here 100 years after us. They were not here in 1763. And this is the research that has been hidden from us that we've captured in the Guyana Reparations Committee. And we've printed 10,000 books. They're free. We've given them away. We've linked past discriminations to modern day discriminations. We've found 15 of those. We've published those. We've shown the legacies of slavery that are impacting us, things that we don't want to talk about. The church has impacted us negatively. We believe that God is white when he isn't. So that's how white superiority impacts us. We're looking up to somebody who's white, who's greater than us. But if you look at our history, from Lucy, the pyramids, Imhotep, Mansa Musa, we were the first farmers, technologists, doctors, nurses, engineers. And now it's reversed on us because we've not been told our history. The greatest harm in our history is the loss of our memory. And in Guyana, we are afraid to go and reclaim it because we want to be one Guyana.
We want to be one Guyana. We want crossover votes. Eric, I reference that Eastern Slave Project. That enslavement.
Let me talk about that.
Yes, please,
the
Eric.
Arab slave trade or the Eastern slave trade went on for 13 centuries.
Here we go.
The Christian slave trade or the European slave trade or the transatlantic slave trade went on for 4 centuries. The Arab slave trade went on for 13 centuries. I was in Mombasa a few months ago. You could see the things. They used to take 35 million Africans were involved in that. They used to make the women concubines. They used to cut off the penis of the men to make them eunuchs. And 70% of them died because of that, to guard the harems. Mm-hmm. And why you think there's not an as much blackness in the Middle East as it is in the Caribbean. When somebody in the harem got pregnant, they killed the child.
Yes.
That's lost. 13 centuries. So my Muslim brothers, when they argue about slavery and all of that, they don't know their history.
That's right.
That happened before the European slave trade. 13
Yes.
centuries. Zanzibar, Kenya, Mombasa, all the way to the Middle East. That's what happened to us. So within 200 years, let me give you another figure. 1650, Africa and Europe had 100 million people. By 1850, Africa shrunk from 100 to 95 million. Europe grew from 100 to 265 million. So we've lost 170 million Africans through that harm of the Arab slave trade and the transatlantic slave trade. And if you deplete a continent of its best, because they didn't take weak people, the weak people they left to die.
Mm-hmm.
They took the best. They took kings and queens and princesses and engineers and brought them here. And that's why we survived. Our children don't even know our DNA and how we survived this. No one else could have. And yet we're ashamed of our history. We're ashamed of our culture. We're ashamed of our heritage. We want to whiten our faces. You want to wear long hair. It's quite sad. But that Eastern slave trade went on for 13 centuries.
There we go. Eric Phillips, you're seeing, I hope you're seeing some of the comments that we're getting here tonight, and the information that you have brought to bear on our discussion here tonight. We strive on this program. You know, we do our party politics some of the time, but I have dedicated myself and dedicated part of this program to do what we are doing here tonight. And that is to empower our people with an understanding of our own history. And you know, and last night I set the stage for tonight's discussion by talking about the Eastern slave trade, the Arab slave trade, and the fact that by the time African people got to where it's today India and Pakistan and so on, the caste system was already in place.
Yeah, they used to hunt us and take us to those countries. There were 5 migrations of Africans throughout the world, and most people don't realize, David, that the first human being was an African, and that as they migrated away from Africa, the skin changed, the eyes changed, the hair changed. All people in this continent or this world are descendants of Africa. I don't know why they're hiding from it, because you can't put a cow and a sheep and get a cow. You have to put 2 human beings together. So we are their original people, the cradle of civilization. Lucy, 3.2 million years ago, we were on this earth. She was 64 pounds and 4 feet inches. And that we don't even know. We don't even know Lucy. We don't even know the skeletons they found in Africa. They don't even know how they tried to take our brain to try to identify how our brains are smaller. I wrote a document on racism and the scientific approach, where all the philosophers, the church, all of these try to find reason. And that's why they call us half human, because they couldn't justify enslaving a full human, but yet everything that they have, they stole from us. Look at the 6,200 skeletons they still have in France. Look at the Benin bronzes. Look at all the the obelisks, the tekins. They have it in Washington. They have it in Paris, copied from Ethiopia. And yet they say that we were animals. But everything we produce, they have in their museums. Making money.
Phillips, Chief Eric Phillips. Eric, I am so interested in that visit you all are going to make to Suriname to reunite with coffee.
The Quenties.
My goodness, because you obviously know about the attempt to marginalize coffee and to say that he would have imposed slavery had he taken control of Berbice. And I hear some black people with that
intellectuals.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, Eric. We have so much work to do.
David,
But,
1763 was before the Haitian Revolution. We inspired
yes,
the Haitian Revolution. They don't
yes.
know that.
And here was this man. Now we're talking about shared governance and democracy. This is a man
He
that says to
started
the
it.
Dutch,
He said, I will be the governor of half and you be the governor of others. Let's share Barbies.
let's share Bobbies. He had one condition. We shall not be slaves anymore.
Precisely.
Oh my goodness. He was clear. And this man, they're trying to pull him down now to say that he was not a hero. He committed
David,
suicide.
another part of our history that is hidden. He could not get to Demerara Essequibo because the Dutch had indigenous people prevent him from crossing from Berbice. So we were trapped. All of that is hidden from us because we want to be nice to everyone else but not speak our history. That was one of the reasons it failed. He was trapped, and they were used to hunt them down and kill them in their maroon communities, starve them out, because the Dutch couldn't find them, and the Dutch were afraid to go and find them.
Brother Eric Phillips here tonight. I want to thank you, Brother Eric. Tell us what's happening. Tell us what's happening with the Reparations Committee at large. What are some of the plans, the broader plans for the Guyanese and Caribbean reparations?
Lots happening, David. Lots. Over this year, so many things. The Africa Union is on board.
Okay.
That's big. The traditional kings and queens who we brought to the Caribbean 2 emancipations ago, the Guyana Reparations Committee, we spent our own money to bring them here. They have now joined it, and they have made a statement that we used to say a long time ago, David, that shared governance in Guyana is a human right for Africans. They have said that reparations is a human right. And they went to the UN last month and spoke about reparations. This is the traditional kings and queens because they were terrorized. They were destroyed. People forget that there's still 767 kingdoms today, still in Africa, whether it's the Zulus or the Shaunas or the Fulanis or all of that, because you don't know our history. So that's happening. The Brattle Report, valuation, mind-boggling, $107 trillion. They broke it down by nation. Holland owes 4.6 trillion, the Portuguese 17, the British 17, in great detail, and it's still a low estimation. Of course, we have a lot of things going on in the USA, California, Illinois, where in Illinois, what they're doing, a group called First Repair, they have taken city council money and given Africans in that area money to buy their homes because there's redlining. So the homes on this side of the train line worth $1 million, the same home over the train line on the other side where Black people worth 50,000. So they've started to do reparations like that. There are lots of studies going on. New York is looking at it. HR 40 is gaining steam. There was a march, or it's a march coming up to say to Biden, sign HR 40. The British monarchy is now on a 2-year study in their archives. Glasgow, the church has put together £100 million for reparations. And that's not even the Catholic Church, which are the main people. I remember the Catholic Church has art alone worth $40 billion, just their art.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And people don't realize that the Catholic Church was the first multinational, the first global multinational was the Catholic Church. All the wealth they've been in Guyana, they own how many churches they own, how much land they own, because the church and the state were one until 1807. People don't know that.
Yeah.
Who are the largest landowners? And why is it that when we started to buy land, it was the church who intervened? So we're now looking at the court case. We're looking to bring African and Caribbean lawyers together to develop a strategy. Whether we go to the ICJ, whether we do a trial case in England, because what the British have done, they've said anything after 1945, you cannot, anything before 1945, you cannot take it to the British court. But this was an international crime. The concern we have is if we take it to the ICJ, because of the politics and the sums that need to be paid, is there politics in the ICJ where they may turn us down? We have the Permanent Forum now, the UN. where they've been asked to get an opinion of the ICJ on if reparations is a crime. We're looking at going to the Security Council. Colombia's on board. Vice President Francia Marquez came to Barbados when the AU was there, so that we now have Latin America, Caribbean, and Africa together in a common bond to pursue reparations. And what people should realize is that without reparatory justice in the Caribbean civilization is at stake. Climate change, unemployment, one-crop economies. We can't survive. Guyana is lucky that we found oil, but the rest cannot. So without reparatory justice, without that 10-point plan, and it's a 10-point plan that makes sense. It's a development plan. The other thing, David, is that we've now started to understand that you can't negotiate against yourself. We Africans love to do that. We call ourselves slaves instead of being enslaved. So we empower other people to call us slaves. The indentureship people say it's a second slavery, but they won't call themselves second slaves, right? So they leave that stigma to us, but they want to equate indentureship with slavery. And we don't call these things out. If you were to put indentureship and slavery together and use those same criteria you had, loss of liberty, loss of life, the two are so different. One was a crime, the other one was a contract. So lots of things are happening. The heads of states are going to write to the British, to the European nations, there are now 9 of them, to ask them to sit down and discuss this. The heirs of slavery, the Gladstones, the Trevelyan's, the Lachelles, they're now coming together to form a lobby in England, in Europe, to say that you must sit down and deal with the Caribbean because this was a crime. And we've apologized for the crime. You should apologize for the crime. They don't want to apologize because once they apologize, it means they're legally liable. Our lawyer friends tell us that. But David, beyond that, we in Guyana, we have to start developing a national development plans for African Guyanese. I've been working on it with some people for quite a while. We have to define our economic future. And yes, the government has a Vision 2030, and it has a budget that drives that. We need to integrate our vision into that vision so that when things are happening in agriculture, our farmers get it. So when things are happening in a different area, but our strategic plan has to define our needs. Our needs are different than other needs. We don't have generational wealth. That's why we're locked out from oil. And therefore, local content should start with local being Africans first. I wrote an article 5 years ago and everybody cursed me out. I said, we do not need local content. We need national content. And now look at the private sector. They're complaining about the Trinidadians and everybody else taking away business because it's local content, but they won't include us. And we're the ones who died for Guyana. So our politicians need to know their history. And if they do, they'll argue differently. And their arguments will be more powerful. But they don't. They won't even visit the 1823 exhibition, their own history, much less fight to teach history in schools. So a lot of things are happening. And I'm glad to say that we in Guyana, we meet every Thursday. One of the things we did that made us so vibrant is that all the other countries, they have commissioners, PhD in this, PhD in that. We have ordinary people. And we opened it up to the public. And in terms of Ipadaji, there are 4 members from Ipadaji on our reparations committee. AGDA, represented by Elton. The Rastafarian community, represented by Sister Esther. Royston Peters, who is an Ipadaji, who represents Essequibo. And we have also one other person who I'm missing right now, Jonathan Adams, who is part of Ipadaji, who represents Black reparation. So we've included everyone. And those who've been excluded, we're open every week to the public. We do 60 events a year. We're in the villages. We got 2 TV programs, one for our elders, one for our young people, where we try to promote African pride. And yet, the politicians haven't supported us because they don't see the connection between reparations and even their ability to get part of what Guyana owes us. They should be promoting it. Yeah. What do they have to offer us other than reparatory justice? Because it's a just cause, and we have all the facts. The Amerindian Act of 2006 is the first Reparatory Justice Act in the Caribbean. It's a precedent. It was done when we were a sovereign state, not a colony. We were Guyana. So that's a precedent. And we should be fighting for reparations from the state of Guyana, as you argued a few weeks back. We argued that in 2001 at the COI, the Commission of Inquiry. And after that, we wrote the Ancestral Rights Bill, we wrote the Perpetual Trust, and we also went and drew a map of the lands we want for reparatory justice. We have that map. We don't boast about it, we don't share it, because there are too many saboteurs, even among our own people.
Eric, on the screen there, one of our regulars, one of the owners of Politics 101, says there in Guyanese parlance. So you hear and you see that you have to become a fixture here for us to talk through these matters. I can't let you go without asking you about these 14 oil blocks that are going to be auctioned. And it's pivotal if we're talking about reparations, because I'm linking, as you have done, the oil to reparations.
David, you're so right. We have missed the boat. There have been 7 oil blocks given out to Africa, to Guyanese, 6 to Indians, and 1 to a Portuguese.
Yes.
And yet, when we applied for one, everybody was against us.
Yeah.
No one wants us to be wealthy, but we deserve it more than any other group in Guyana. 473,000 of us died. And those oil blocks that are being auctioned, 3 or 4 should be set aside for us.
That's what I want.
Generational wealth, that's reparations.
That's what I wanted to ask.
Parade ground and making a monument of it where our ancestors were hung. That's reparations. Making sure that history is taught in school, that's reparations.
That's
there
where
are
I
many
was
ways
going.
of reparations, but we're disconnected from the political architecture. Winner take all is not reparations. Shared government is reparations. And if you start to look at things in that context of reparations and generational wealth, the politicians who we vote for would look at things very differently. But they don't, because they don't know their history. And they're afraid to be involved in our culture because they want everybody else to vote for them, but they don't want to vote for us. And we're the ones supporting them.
Eric Phillips saying it better than I could ever say it. Eric, say it again. They want everybody else to vote for them.
But they don't want to vote for us.
They don't want to vote for us. And you all know on this program that I got part of my activism in party politics. But you all know where I stand on that question. All right? If you're going after a crossover vote, 2% crossover vote from other ethnic groups, you got about 25% crossover vote among Africans. That's people who feel you've neglected them and they want nothing to do with you. And you have to convince them to cross over from their apathy to come, and you all don't see them as crossover vote. I want you all going to tell you all political leaders, David Hines and Eric Phillips say here tonight, you all get crossover vote to fight for in the Black community.
Absolutely.
And we are socializing a new African. It was Carter Woodson who talked about the new Negro.
Yes, Dr. G. Wilson.
Right. And we in Guyana have to refresh. We have to refresh our African content. And we are about socializing a new African who's conscious of his or her identity and confident and recognize that there is no national politics without African politics. You all understand? That's why they're cussing we every day. Last night, GHK Lal was drawing to our attention that Mr. Jagdeo, a couple of years, a challenge to debate Eric Phillips and David Hines. And it was not an accident. It was not an accident. Eric, your closing thoughts.
David, thank you for this program. It's all about education. It's all about understanding our history. Until we understand our history, we won't appreciate what we're fighting for, both in terms of reparatory justice and both in terms of social justice in Guyana. We need to keep educating not only our people, but all of Guyana, because a lot of people are miseducated. And unless we do use these platforms to educate people in the diaspora and let them see the reality, I am not deluded that we're going to win a take all election. You can't. We need shared governance, and we should have been fighting for that since 2020, the last election. Because until we are part of the table sharing the bread, we're always going to be left out. Because others in this society know that they can exclude us by coming together. If you look at 1823 and you look at 1763 and you see the forces that have combined together against us, nothing has changed, but we don't recognize it.
Nothing has changed. Eric, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for lending your expertise, lending your vast knowledge on these issues. Our people have left here tonight. Many people are saying that we have to rebroadcast this program and so on. And for sure, we are going to do it. Eric, thanks. And I'm going to be inviting you back. I know that you are busy. And
David, I'm on this 8 hours a day and it's unpaid. I hear people saying I'm being paid by the government. I am part of the PPP. I mean, it's so madness because they don't like success. They try to, that's part of our problem. Instead of building each other up, we try to find untrue stories to talk about us. And it's because we don't understand leadership. We understand how to be bosses, but we don't understand strategic leadership.
Strategic leadership. Eric, thank you very much, Chief Eric Phillips, here tonight. Thank you very much, my brother.
Thank you, David.
And thank you all, 101 family. Thank you all so much, because you all recognize the difference between chat and real talk, real education. See you all tomorrow night, where we continue the conversation. I don't remember off the top of my head who we're having on tomorrow night. I know on Friday night we're having Brother Nigel Hughes. Expect Roysdale Ford for them to come on and talk about Article 15. And we're also going to have a surprise guest. I'm not telling you all who it is, but the person who came up with Article 15, who drafted Article 15, is going to be here. That's going to be a big surprise. So until tomorrow night, you all stay woke. Stay woke. Because if you're not woke, Crapo smoke we pipe. And they didn't do it during enslavement. They didn't do it after enslavement. And we're not going to allow them to do it. No. See you all tomorrow.